Hello and welcome to Just Hoops. The pick and roll is one of the most utilized actions in modern basketball, and in today's video we're going to dive in to the basics of pick and roll offense and defense. We're going to dive into modern basketball real quick and give you some numbers to go through the last 5 seasons of the NBA and talk about the pick and roll. So in 18-19, Utah led the NBA with 47.9 pick and roll possessions per game. The average was 35.5. In 1920, Atlanta led with 49.1 pick and roll possessions per game. The average was 37.08 ball screens per game. In 2021, San Antonio led with 45.2. The average that season was 35.47. In 21-22, Utah led with 46.1 ball screens per game, and the average was 35.72. And this past season, Chicago led with 43.4 ball screens per game, and the average was 35.73 ball screens per game. In addition, this past season, over a third of possessions had a ball screen for about 35 points per game on these attacks, and shooting 47% from the field in pick and roll. So why do teams run so much pick and roll? From the offensive end of things, the goal is to put 2 on the ball and to have an advantage, or to get the defense behind the action to have numbers in front. You can see throughout these 3 clips that there is an advantage made, whether it is by the ball handler coming off the screen with numbers in front of them, or by multiple guys coming onto the ball and having an advantage behind the play. And then in terms of the defense, the goals of guarding the pick and roll come down to keeping it 2-on-2, not allowing that advantage to be made whether at the point of attack or behind the play by zoning up and positioning yourself, and just to find ways to force the offense into tough plays, whether it means by your coverage or your off-ball positioning. Your goal as a defense is to just slow down that attack and prevent advantages, and offenses to dictate what happens. So to start the pick and roll index, we're going to go to the offensive side of things first and talk about different styles of ball screen attacks. Starting things off with the basics, we're going to talk about a high middle ball screen. The high middle ball screen is a ball screen set above the arc in the middle third of the floor, allowing the offense player to come off the screen and have an advantage going to their strong hand typically, but just having the middle of the floor to work and operate with guys spaced around them in a variety of different ways, which we'll talk about later, but attacking out of the middle of the floor, trying to get paint touches. Next, we're going to talk about the high side pick and roll. This is a pick and roll set higher on the floor like the middle ball screen, but on the side thirds of a floor to allow a player to attack a side, whether baseline or middle of the floor, just to have more space to play with, get their advantage downhill, and then it just offers more spacing for an offensive player to attack in that 2v2 and also have 3 guys spaced off the ball. First type of spacing we're going to talk about is 3 flat. Here you'll see 3 offensive players below the ball screen action, flat along the baseline. And then here we have 3-man spacing. The ball screen is set on the side of the floor. The 3 guys off the ball are high and wide on the weak side. And lastly, we'll talk about triangle spacing, where the 3 guys off the ball are lined up in a triangle formation with 2 guys wide and the 3rd guy on the porch weak side of the floor. Next, we're going to talk about the optionality of screening angles. Here we have flat ball screens. There's 2 clips here where the screener is set parallel to the baseline, allowing the offensive player to dictate the direction they attack. A flip or twist screen is a screen in which the screener will change their direction either prior to, like this first clip for the Cavs, or after the initial screen, like this clip here for the Sacramento Kings. Both of these, the screener screens initially one way, flips before or after the contact to change the direction and screw up the defensive communication. A step-up screen is set on the side third of the floor, allowing the offense to attack to the baseline. The screener is setting the screen in a way that allows the offense player to attack the side of the floor rather than going to the middle. Horns ball screens are ball screens where there are 2 screeners set on both sides of the on-ball defender, giving the on-ball player optionality in the direction in which they attack. A stagger 77, or Phoenix ball screen is where there are two screeners set in the same direction, screening the on-ball defender to allow a single-way attack for the offense player to go. A ram screen is a screen set for the on-ball screener to free themselves up prior to setting the screen at the point of attack. A slip screen is when the screener dives prior to creating contact with the on-ball defender. A ghost screen is a type of slip where the screener abandons the play but pops instead of dives. And the last type of screen we're going to talk about is a Spain pick and roll. You can see that the initial on-ball screen happens, but behind that there's a back screen set for the initial screener on the dive, and then they pop. So it turns into a roll replace off of a back screen. Now we're going to flip sides of the floor and talk about the defensive side of how teams guard versus the pick and roll attack. First, let's talk about drop coverage. Drop coverage is like here with Brook Lopez. He is sunk back, dropping toward the hoop to protect the basket. So there's a few details and variations when it comes to drop coverage. First, the location of the drop. You can have a deep drop where the man is at the rim or at the restricted area, very deep like here versus Utah. Brook Lopez sinks back very deep in the paint. Or you could have it higher where you saw in earlier clips he was at the top of the lane protecting from the foul line. And then secondly, the guard. He can go over or under based on personnel and the location of the action. Next, we're going to talk about icing or downing a ball screen. Here, you can see the Denver Nuggets do a great job. They force the ball away from the screening direction, and then the big drops to contain the ball. This is icing. It's forcing the ball handler away from the screening action and pinning them to a side. Denver does a great job in this first example, but overall, the goal of an ice or down is to force opposite the direction of the screen, and then the big's responsibility is to contain the ball and also protect versus the roll, which is like a cat and mouse game, which is kind of like a drop, but it's just on one side of the floor as compared to whatever spot on the floor the action is coming from. Downing and icing is first the responsibility of the ball, pinning the ball handler away from the screen and forcing them to a side of the floor.
What we do here is go back.
The soft show, flat, or cowboy is a common coverage when you want to apply some pressure but not fully commit. Here you can see Joel Embiid was around the level of the screen, and then he commits to the ball and allows the guy that was initially guarding the ball to get back and try to get back into the action. Here you can see another example. Joel is at the level or slightly below the level of screen. The guy guarding the ball fights over and tries to get back into play, but Joel has to commit for 2 or 3 slides, or whoever the big is in coverage has to commit until the man guarding the ball gets back in front and is able to make a play on the ball. Next, we're going to talk about a hard show or a hard hedge. This is where the big in coverage shoots up above the level of the screen, committing to the ball for 2 or 3 slides or until the ball goes dead to force a tough play, get the ball out of the ball handler's hands, or to make them retreat slightly. The big is going to shoot up above the level, hot hands active for those 2 to 3 slides or until the ball goes dead, and then retreats back with hot hands to make the pass difficult to get to his man. The guy guarding the ball has to fight over the level of the screen, have hands high, and then get back in front before the man in coverage gets back to retreat. The last coverage we're going to talk about is switching. Switching is where the 2 defenders in a ball screen action switch who they're guarding at the mesh point. You can switch above and below the screen, so the guy switching off the ball can either go on the top side of the screener or try to get below the screener in order to prevent a roll by bumping him under or preventing an easy pass by going over and denying the passing lane. The guy guarding up into the ball must get up, activate the ball at the point of the switch, and then also there's variation of switching. Here we see a triple switch. We see Jaylen Brown switch onto the ball, we see Derek White pick up the pop, and then you keep size at the rim by picking up the low man as that third switch. We're going to get another example here of a triple switch where you get the initial switch at the point, Big picks up the roll, and then the guards switch it with each other to keep on the perimeter. The stars of today's NBA, from Luka to Lillard to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all are phenomenal in the pick and roll from an efficiency standpoint and just the shot quality that they produce. Defenses in today's modern basketball are challenged with finding out ways and coverages to slow it down. It is such a huge part of today's game. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, learned something about the pick and roll from an offensive and defensive standpoint. For more content like this, please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll catch you in the next one.